The following is a Shaw TV Public Affairs presentation. Constituency Report is produced as a public service by members of the BC Legislature through the facilities of Shaw TV.
Hello and welcome to Constituency Report. I'm Tracy Grimsrud. Very pleased to welcome Coralee Oakes to the studio today. She is MLA for Cariboo North. Welcome back, Coralee.
Thank you, and Tracy, thanks for having us.
Yeah, it's wonderful to have you here, and I know we have a lot to talk about on the program today. I want to start, though, with what is the biggest, most significant issue your region has been dealing with lately, and that's, of course, this summer's devastating wildfire season. Can you speak a bit about the magnitude of the losses people are seeing?
Well, this entire summer has been such a difficult summer for constituents. We went through, of course, the most significant wildfire season that the province has ever seen. One fire in our area is the largest fire ever recorded in BC's history. Wow. And the impact it has on the communities, not just people who've suffered incredible, devastating loss, but now as we look at recovery and what those steps are that are going to be required, it is overwhelming. It is incredibly emotional. On the positive side, though, I have never seen, the community and the surrounding communities step up, and everyone came to the aid of their neighbors and came to support one another, and there was amazing acts of kindness that we have seen throughout this past summer. So it just reminds us that the benefits of living in smaller communities where everyone comes to the aid.
Definitely. You've raised some specific cases in the House, speaking of recovery, constituents who maybe feel they haven't received as timely a response as they would like from the government. Can you outline some of those situations for us?
Yeah, well, some of the biggest ones is we had contractors that worked on day one on the wildfires starting in July. And so these are a lot of logging contractors, self-employed individuals. Some of the contractors were owed up to $1 million. And in fact, the company that I raised in the House, a First Nations company, NASCO Economic Development Corporation, and I started raising in the House in September, were owed close to $1 million. I just got an email this weekend that they are down to being owed $100,000. But I mean, for people who, these are small businesses, and whether it's their fuel bills that they have to pay or whether it's just paying their payroll, when you are owed that much money from the government and you're asked to carry that for months, the impacts that we're seeing in our community is significant, and we need to make sure that people are getting paid.
How did it make you feel to hear the Ministry of Citizen Services was charging people amounts of like $5,000 for FOI documents pertaining to their wildfire losses?
Well, it was, I think it was incredibly hurtful. And if I've read the emails from the ministry, and just the complete lack of, compassion for individuals that have lost, significant amount of, in the McNabb's experience, they've lost outbuildings, a sawmill, in the Frasers, they lost their ranch, fish pot, the list goes on. And the people just want to know what were the steps that were taken to keep their properties protected. And they need that information in order to file certain things in order to rebuild. And so it's incredibly important information for community members to start to rebuild. And the fact that not only do you not have somebody compassionate on the other end who really didn't even know where the area was, and then to be charged, well, if you want this information, it's going to cost you $5,000. And we had to push for a month in order to get resolved to that. It was discouraging.
Definitely. And what is recovery going to look like for those fire victims? Do you think they have the confidence that the assistance will be there to help them rebuild?
This is the most important question that we are facing in our region. both in the Cariboo, Chilcotin, Fraser, Nicola, and of course Cariboo North. And the 3 MLAs have gone to almost all the estimates now. There's a few more estimates that are happening in the House, whether it's Forest, Lands and Natural Resources, Finance, EMBC, Transportation. And we ask the question of every single minister, what do you have in this budget that is specifically going to be geared towards people dealing with recovery? And the response we keep getting back, well, we will be putting a Treasury Board submission in next year. So we will be gathering the information and we'll be working with local governments in order to identify how much money will be required. So at this point, for all of those people who are struggling and winter is here, and I mean, I've got constituents without hydro, I've got constituents without electricity, we've got to look at how we affect water, like for wells and septic who want to rebuild, and there's so much work to be, you know, moving forward. It's going to require money. And to be told, well, we'll put a Treasury Board submission in next year, I don't think is good enough. And you know, the other significant piece that we're trying to raise awareness, it's wonderful that they talk about ground up and giving that to a local government to do, you know, to do that work. But that means our local government, for example, in Quesnel, is now responsible for gathering information hundreds of kilometers away, whether it's a trapper or whether it's a guide and outfitter, whether it's a rancher, whether it's a placer miner. And, you know, we want to make sure that there's resources for people that have been so significantly impacted. And in some cases, when you look at guide and outfitters or trappers, it's a generation. It's going to take a generation to recover. And for many of these small businesses, it's been in the families for generations. And so you have the emotional toll of losing, you know, of losing your structures, losing your small business, and trying to figure out how you're going to rebuild.
Absolutely. You mentioned estimates debate, and as you mentioned, I've been active, especially with regards to wildfire issues. Any other issues within the Ministry of Forest, Lands and Natural Resource Operations that you'd like to highlight?
Well, when you come and talk to industry right now, there's a couple of things that are significant, of significant importance. Of course, softwood lumber is a big one, top of mind of everyone in any forest-based community, and so many communities in British Columbia, so many families are dependent on forest, the forest sector, critically important. But there's other things that we are trying to raise awareness. The spruce beetle epidemic is growing, and there is concern that it could be even more impactful than the mountain pine beetle, and you know the devastation it has had in British Columbia and specifically in communities in the interior. We asked in estimates where the resources are for the for spruce beetle, spruce bud beetle. I'm feeling that it's not on the radar yet, and it has to be. Resources have to be learning from the mountain pine beetle, making sure that we're taking proactive steps when it comes to the spruce beetle, because you know, when these epidemics come through and ravish the forest economy, it ravishes communities and it ravishes families. Any issues around permitting and staffing within the ministry that you want to mention? Yeah, well, we've had, you know, one of the challenges we've had, particularly this summer, is because everyone was pulled off of permitting in the Forest, Lands and Natural Resource offices, which we understand, to work on the wildfires. So, for example, the placer sector, which require permits, no permits were being released, or limited permits. So you had, you know, an entire seasonal sector who were not able to get access to permits. And I asked the minister, in light of the fact that he's mentioned that he wants to expedite permits to get all the, you know, the burnt salvageable wood, you know, out of the forest and into the, you know, into the mills and into, you know, small scale salvage operations. He wants to expedite that. You know, there's a long list of things that they want to do, but I asked specifically in estimates, well, do you have any additional resources available to hire staff? And there isn't. So you have, you know, a perfect storm in essence, where you have, you know, FLNRO staff who've done a fantastic job, who are dealing with backlogs from having been out of their specific sector permitting jobs for a summer, who are now having to catch up. but also dealing with the significant impacts of the wildfires and dealing with all the permits that are going to be required, whether it's agriculture, forestry, tourism. Because don't forget, when we had a rafting company that came up to us, and anyone that uses the land base or has tenure is going to have to now reapply for looking at new tenure opportunities because of the significant amount of damage. And our fears are there's just not going to be the staffing levels to address these significant challenges.
You also serve as small business critic for the BC Liberals. The wildfire season has also had a tremendous impact on small business owners, hasn't it?
Well, I just mentioned the rafting company. Tourism has been significantly hit. Early estimates of the first 5 weeks, $23 million impact on tourism just in our region, which is significant. Whether it's a rafting company, there is a trail ride company. These companies are down up to 70%. And the impact that has, it's not just on their small business, but the investment that they make in our communities. You've got self-employed, contractors that were not able to work. You've got the placer mining sector, which, hundreds of millions of dollars it contributes to local economy, and they didn't work because they weren't able to get access into the land base. So this trickle-down effect is going to have significant impact on our small businesses. We've
been hearing a lot in recent months about some potential tax changes at the federal level that had a lot of small business owners quite upset. And this was something that you raised with BC Finance Minister Carol James. What kind of response did you get from her?
Well, again, their response is, well, let them consult. And that's not good enough. We have to be standing up for small businesses. Small businesses are the backbone in every single community of this province, whether it's urban or rural. And you think of the mom and pop operators that support not just community types events, but they support sporting events and cultural events. I was really disappointed when, for many years we had Small Business Month, and I took great pride, whether it was as a minister or whether I worked as, in my previous job with the Chamber of Commerce. And we'd have events celebrated all across British Columbia about Small Business Month, and we celebrated in every single region, every single sector, small business. The new government, not only do they not have a minister for small business, they moved it from a month down to a week. We asked the question in estimates, when I was asking the minister, I said, well, what was the response? Why did you change it from a month to a week? And, the work that we did was to raise awareness, whether it's a First Nations business, whether it's a women's business, and to try and grow and set targets and goals and objectives, because I think, if you're able to measure success of small business, that's how we drive us forward and to make sure that we've got resources in the right place.
A few moments ago, you touched on the softwood lumber dispute. How disappointed were you with the recent news that Canada and the U.S. were unable to reach a deal regarding softwood lumber duties?
Well, it's what's incredibly troubling is, being in the epicenter of not just the mountain pine beetle epidemic, and then to go through the wildfire season, and then we had a horrible fire accident, a fire in Williams Lake at the Toco Mill. It just feels that there's one thing after the other, and Premier Horgan on the election said that he would fix it, and that he had the wherewithal. He was going to go down to Washington and make sure everything was good and taken care of, and we can't even get staff resourcing out of our Forest Lands and Natural Resource Office to help us get permits out the door so that we can keep our mills operating now.
Right.
So it's disappointing.
Definitely. And you recently paid a visit to West Fraser Mill. What was discussed with the folks there?
Well, I think it's really important that when we talk about technology, we talk about the importance, of different sectors in the province of British Columbia. If you tour West Fraser's operational headquarters is in Quesnel for North America. And the impact that has on our community in the region, that West Fraser would choose to invest in a small community like Quesnel. I mean, they have close to 100 employees just in their IT department alone. Their sales department is significant. It runs, the sales division for all of North America. Wow. It's the largest sawmill in the world, and it's right here in British Columbia. It's in the interior. Yeah. And, so it's important that we listen to what companies, have to say. And like I said, what they told me loud and clear is they're incredibly concerned about the spruce beetle. Yeah. and that we need to make sure that there's adequate resources being put into that and a clear plan of action of how we're going to address it.
I think it's a good time to take a short break here on Constituency Report. We've got transportation and a host of other issues to chat about with MLA Coralee Oakes. But first, grab a pen and paper. We're going to put up contact information for MLA Oakes, and we'll be back to chat much more with her right after this. Welcome back to Constituency Report as we continue our chat today with Cariboo North MLA Coralee Oakes. And as promised, turning to transportation issues, I hear there's a safety issue on Highway 97 at Racing Road that you've been working to address. Tell us the situation there.
Yeah, thanks, Tracy. I think I might take a step back. One of the things we did when the Canfor Mill closed, we did significant work with a small business roundtable, number of different organizations, small business, business improvement areas, and we had an 18-month strategic plan on looking at how we would work towards supporting our community in transformation. And transportation is a critical aspect of that. And so out of this pilot, this community opportunities pilot, where we were fortunate to have multiple different ministries come to Quesnel and talk about opportunities to help us diversify. We put together a really strategic plan around transportation, and a number of those things I know we're going to talk about today. The result of that is over $100 million in a year that we have been able to work towards investing in the community. We know that there's been a lot of accidents that have happened on Highway 97 near Racing Road, and we began the consultation prior to the election. And it was important for me during estimates to reconfirm of the new government that these investments are going to continue, and that consultation and the reviews will be coming out in the spring. Critically important for our region. So it was good that the government is confirming that money is still going forward. Same as the Cariboo Connector, which was work that that we had done for a number of years to make sure that continued investment happens in that critical corridor.
What about commercial truck routes in the riding? Any issues there?
Yeah, well, we've been working on that for many decades, and it comes with controversy, and it comes with a lot of mixed messaging or mixed information about that. But I think it's, again, as part of our community diversifying and the work that is needed when we look at diversifying our region, a commercial truck route is critically important to that. And again, that conversation will be happening in the spring. I mean, there's lots of conversations that said, well, all of those projects that we had prior to the election, nothing's going forward. And, my job as the MLA is to make sure that we continue the amazing work that individuals did in our community to raise the awareness of that. So, that $100 million in projects, whether it was transportation, the hospital, whether it was housing, all of those projects are, moving forward, and they remain on track. And so I think it's important for constituents to know that. And I hear you've also been engaging with various ministers as you advocate for a road and bridge project for an emergency route for the Kloos area. So we certainly saw it this last summer, the importance of having multiple emergency access points for communities, whether it's the First Nations communities out in the Naskor, Kloos, Dene, or out in the Purdon Connector. These roads are critical to the safety of many of our remote rural communities, but it's also about the opportunity around economic diversification. I am so incredibly proud of the work that the Southern Carrier Nation is doing right now around diversification and training for Aboriginal people, but also for the community at large. This road creates the opportunity that close to 2,600 jobs. 2,600 jobs at a time when right now, our community is going to need to diversify. And so this is a critical road. I've raised it at multiple estimates, and we're not going to stop until we're successful. So, I stay tuned. I'm very confident that this road is going to be moving forward shortly, and I'm very confident that it's going to have a significant impact.
We'll keep our eye on that one for sure. There's been a lot of debate in the House about Bill 6. This is the NDP's bill on proportional representation. Any thoughts you want to share on that one?
Well, Tracy, I have lots of thoughts on that, and could probably do a whole constituent report on that. For me, what it comes down to is, and again, going back to the wildfire season, I mean, we represent, as an MLA, I represent an area of close to 34,000 square kilometers. The riding alone is the size, of small provinces, and in many cases, small countries. And the idea that proportional representation based on population would look at taking away rural ridings and matching it to what the federal counterpart is. So if you were to look at our riding, for example, my riding right now is 33,000. So you'd go up to, if it was the federal riding, it would be 83,000 square kilometers.
Wow. And
I think of this summer. I think of the calls I would get at 1 a.m. To help, an elderly person who wasn't able to evacuate. Or I think the work, it takes to go out to NASCO and drive these important conversations, or Spoken Lake or Miocene or Horsefly or Likely, or what it means to be a rural MLA, to be in these communities. I think the conversation, I often hear my Green colleagues, or especially or any of the MLAs, who talk about going home each night to tuck their kids in bed. And I think that's lovely if you're able to do it. But the true reality of being a rural MLA is that it takes us a day and a half to travel each way, to get home. And you are going to make the ridings even larger for us. And you've got areas where many of our areas don't have cell coverage. And, the reality is a lot of times even phone lines are down, and it takes 3 weeks for them to be fixed. You don't have pay phones. You don't have, the dynamics of representing a rural community and making sure that their voice is heard is significantly different than what it means to be in an urban riding. So maybe, if they want proportional representation based on square kilometers, and we divide the province into 87 square kilometers that's equal in size, well, maybe that's a different conversation. But at this point, I think there's, as far as the democracy of ensuring that our constituents in rural BC's voices are heard, I think it's probably one of the most significant bills that have been brought forward in the House for a long, long time. Another interesting one is Bill 3, the Election Amendment Act. What are some of your concerns around this piece of legislation? Well, I raised my concerns in the House. First, there's many pieces of the bills I do agree with, as far as eliminating corporate and union donations and the work that we're doing. I think it's work that we had brought forward in a similar bill into the House on a couple of occasions. But to have the conversation all of a sudden show up in a bill with actually no conversation about now that the average citizen is going to now have to pay for political parties financing campaigns, when the premier ran on during the election and saying, no, that's not going to be the case. Why should my grandmother now have to fund parties? Our democracy is about choice, and it's about saying, well, I support this party and I'm going to put my weight, whether it's supporting financially or volunteering or what have you. Right. But now that every citizen is going to now be required to finance that, and the way it was brought in, I just think that if you say one thing on the election campaign, I think you have an obligation. If people voted for you based on what you said during an election campaign, I think that it's important to follow through with that. And it's our job as opposition now to make sure that we're holding the new government to account on what they've said.
Absolutely. I know the best part of any community is its people, and a few minutes left in the show. Let's recognize some of them. I know recently the Small Business Awards, Business Excellence Awards were held, and this is just a wonderful celebration of local small business, isn't it?
Yeah, both Williams Lake had their Business Excellence Awards, Quesnel had their Business Excellence Awards, and it is really the highlight of the year to have the ability to showcase so many fantastic small businesses. Every small business is a winner, and it was a great night of celebration.
Next, I wanted to ask about the cenotaph visit with Coralee students that we see in this next set of photos. What was this all about?
Well, we had the opportunity to meet with Sarah Guest and her grade 6-7 class last year, and we have some amazing individuals. Paul and Terry Nichols of Communities for Veterans in our town, from Coralee, who rode across Canada to raise awareness for veterans.
Right.
And the community of Coralee have become such an intrinsic part of the success of the work that they're doing. And Sarah Guest, as the teacher for this grade 6-7 class, have spent a year focused on supporting veterans. They've wrote letters, they've done tremendous work, and now they've done they did this fundraising campaign to raise awareness around how we needed to recognize on this cenotaph both Korea and Afghanistan veterans. To have young people that have been so incredibly engaged, they're making such a huge impact, and I was very, very proud of them.
And what's new with the Quesnel Community Foundation? This is a great group, isn't it?
Another organization that provides so much support to so many great organizations in the community. I would remind everyone, donations right now I think are getting matched, so make sure you get your donation in because it goes towards great groups in the region.
I want to mention the breakfast event with local seniors that was held recently. How did you enjoy this opportunity to connect with them?
Yeah, I think it's really important, and again, as a local MLA, to make sure that we're reaching out to our seniors who a lot of times are vulnerable and isolated in their homes. And so I like to ensure that I'm attending seniors breakfast so that I can hear firsthand what their concerns are, making sure that that they have the supports and resources that they need.
And we've got a nice photo of you here with local ambassador Miri Saberwal. Tell us about her contributions to the community.
Well, I think, the Miss Quesnel Self-Development Program is a tremendous program that is based on volunteerism and empowerment of young people. They learn public speaking. They put hundreds and hundreds of hours of volunteerism into the community. And Miri, of course, is one of our BC ambassadors, which is it's the provincial recognition. We're so incredibly proud of her. She now travels across the province and really is a scholarship program based on volunteerism, recognition of communities, but as well as it helps provide really dynamic individuals with scholarship support to pursue education.
Oh, great. Great role model for young people.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, we've run out of time. We had other great events. Terry Fox Run, Quesnel Volunteer Fire Appreciation Dinner, Take Back the Night, all wonderful community events. But alas, we're out of time. Thanks for the visit today, Coralee. Great to have you.
Thank you, Tracy.
Coralee Oakes, she is MLA for Cariboo North. If you'd like more information about some of the topics and issues we've discussed on the program today, please check out her website, coraleeoakesmla.ca. Thanks so much for watching Constituency Report.